And welcome back, everybody, to the 37th Annual California Small Farm Conference. My name is Evan Wigg. I'm with Community Alliance with Family Farmers, and we are so excited to have you here. If you are looking for a practical entrepreneurship guide to raising poultry on pasture or integrated with crops, you are in the right place. We've got a fantastic panel today with a couple of poultry farmers and experts. So you are in for a treat. Just want to encourage everybody to use the chat and Q&A feature down below. In the chat, feel free to introduce yourself, let us know where you're coming from, and share resources with other attendees. And then use the Q&A function if you have any questions for our panelists. We'll make sure to share those with them at the end of the workshop so we can get your questions answered. And with that, I just want to give a huge thank you to all three of you for being here with us today, sharing your expertise, your knowledge, and for being in conversation with our small farm community. So with that, I will pass it on to you, Ann. Thanks for being here.
Great. Thank you, Evan. Good morning. I'm Ann Beyer. I'm with the National Center for Appropriate Technology and the ATTRA project. And I'm really honored to have two amazing farmers here this morning with us, Caleb Barron and Tyler from Big Bluff Ranch. And we're going to get started with hearing a little bit about who's with us this morning, because we want to make this as practical and relevant to you as possible. So Evan, could we do that poll now? Great. So we'll take a minute, and would like to know if you're currently raising birds, and if so, layers or broilers or both. Whether you're currently farming or just looking into it and planning. And either way is great. I think this workshop will be really helpful for you either way. So we'll give that just a moment to see who's here. And then again, feel free to share your own information in the chat, but also the questions that you have in the Q&A. And we will look at those as we can as we go along and try to get as many of those questions answered as possible. Great. So looks like so far we have about 47% of you raising laying hens, and 37 who are aspiring, and then some support folks.
Uh-oh, no broilers, no broiler raisers yet.
I guess we might as well just go home. I don't know anything about layers. Well, that's not true, but.
So yeah, it just happens that we do have two broiler experts, but I think a lot of what you guys are going to say is going to be relevant to layers as well. And I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm up to as, well, let me just go ahead and get started with that. On. Well, I can see my screen. Just a second. I have to figure out how you can. I think I can do this. Okay, how's that? So as with the National Center for Appropriate Technology, we have a beginning farmer rancher development project grant, and it's called Two Strong Wings because it's focusing on poultry production and profitability. I'm going to encourage you as we go along to think about what your goals are, setting those goals, planning, implementing, keeping good records so that you can measure meaningful progress toward hopefully a three-part goal that includes your economic viability, but also your resource base and the people, including yourselves and your community. I'll show a few pictures here of just a variety of pastured poultry. I'm focusing on pastured poultry, but this, of course, applies to many types of operations. This is my former colleague, Spence, Terrell Spencer, and he has Across the Creek farm in Arkansas, has been learning for a really long time and has scaled up. It grazes broilers and layers on pasture, which is really an amazing operation where one of the American Pastured Poultry Producers Association, or APA, says the movement matters. So moving birds over pasture. Fifth Crow is another operation. They raise laying hens, and Mike and Teresa do an amazing job with guard dog and the feeders that are treadle feeders that are helping keep the feed safe from other birds that might be on the farm. The chickens can hop up on that and open it up. Clean water, of course. Rancho Soquel is taking a different approach. They have a small flock of laying hens, and they come out and they graze those in their vegetable plots after the vegetables are done. So they rotate them between the kind of a covered shelter area and the fields. So there are a lot of ways to do this. More of a free range, dry lot with lots of wood chips is spade and plow. Brooders are very important, and Caleb's going to talk a lot more about that. Soul Seeker has more of an expansive egg and meat operation. Depending on the climate, you're going to want to make the adaptations that make it work best in your situation. And I'd like to, can you see that whole screen, or have I got let me do that. So the National Center for Appropriate Technology, here's the basic information, the ways to get a hold of us in Spanish and English by email, and my own email is there too. And if you're not familiar with NCAT and ATTRA, take a look at the website and see what resources are there. We have a page dedicated to poultry, including, I didn't mention the Burroughs Family Farm. There's a playlist of 7 videos there that Rosie kindly did. And those are really informative, I'd say, and inspiring. And I'm working now on revising some of our old publications. And one of those is the Poultry Entrepreneurs Toolbox. So these are some of the topics that we're going to be covering and updating. And if you have suggestions for what else you'd like to see go into this, please let me know, because I'm working on that actively and want to make it as relevant as possible. One of our partners in this project, the BFRDP, or Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Project, is UC Davis. They also have a very extensive website and connections to the state laboratories and who to ask. And there's a lot there. And there's 3 organizations I want to mention that are excellent resources as well. And the American Pastured Poultry Producers Association. You can tap into their expertise, even if you're not a member, by their free calls that happen every month. But it's well worth the $60 to tap into all the resources that they have, and the newsletters and the listserv, and Caleb and Tyler can talk more about that. And MPAN also has a really great set of setting up a processing plant and thinking through that whole thing, and with them case studies. In fact, the Food Animal Concerns Trust has a number of webinars. So we try to coordinate with all these folks and make the best information possible available. Certifications, of course, I've heard that, part of the question is feasibility and whether you can qualify to do this, but also what is it that it benefits? And I've heard people say that just doing the process of getting certified has actually helped them improve their operations in terms of animal welfare. And so thinking about, does your market require this, or would you get a price premium? What makes sense for your operation? So looking at the whole farming system, all that goes into it, the money, time, the inputs, the management, and the outputs, the production and profit, and thinking about the tools that will be most useful for you. And that's what I'm hoping to put together with the Poultry Toolbox, to have tools that help you set goals, to do the business planning, to do the farm record keeping. And so if you haven't started yet, or if you have, I find good ways to compare reality with what you hope to have accomplished and figure out what decisions you make next. Looking at costs is really important for different kinds of operations. Tyler and Caleb will talk more about that, but just a little snapshot of what goes into that. Into a layer operation, they're different, and some of the decisions you make are going to be really important in terms of looking at feed costs, which is one of the main ones, and how that influences your profitability. The price per pound, whether it's 50 cents or 90 cents, makes a difference. And in part of this profitability, you're going to have overhead costs, and you'll hear both Caleb and Tyler talk a little bit about that. You'll hear a lot about production and variable costs today, and how those relate to each other is how you can increase your profit, either by reducing your overhead or increasing your number of birds, or increasing your prices. And it's really important to have a sense of what you need for yourself and your farm, but also a responsibility, as Dan Macon, the UC Extension economist, says, to the rest of the agricultural community, to treat your business seriously. So here's a couple of examples of profitability calculators, and I can drop some other references in the chat. These are really useful because then you can practice on paper. It's a lot cheaper than trying it in real life. There's a variety of spreadsheets that are useful for different kinds of operations. And keeping records, you'll figure out what is actually happening on your farm, different ways to do it, but always best if it can be done by the person doing it. And so from my part, in closing, you're not alone. Each of us knows something. Together we know more. So keep in touch, and let's hear what Caleb has to say now, and please share your questions in the chat or in the Q&A.
All right, thanks, Ann.
Oh, and I need to pull up yours, right?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Hey everybody, Caleb Barron with Fogline Farm here, based out of Santa Cruz, California. The farm is 20 minutes north on the county line of San Mateo and Santa Cruz, next to Año Nuevo State Park. I lease 40 acres up there. My third location, so I have moved my broiler operation 3 times, so that's doable as a first piece of info. Well, it hasn't been fun, and I'm expecting to have to move again at some point, but I just kind of keep rolling forward and hoping for the best. Yeah, unfortunately, Tyler and I don't raise layers, but a lot of the stuff, as Ann said, correlates a little bit, especially the brooder management, which I'll go over in a second. But I have raised layers in a larger, in the beginning when we were more diverse, doing pigs, veggies, orchards, layers, broilers. And as I decided to simplify in order to manage my time better and start a family and having to move the operation, I chose kind of my first love and craft, which was meat bird raising, as my main enterprise, and have just rolled with that. So yeah, and then another disclaimer is I'm not good at records. I'm not good record keeping. I'm not good at financials. So that's why we invited Tyler on here. And I'm not a great example of that kind of stuff, but I've just kept pushing forward and growing and scaling, and it all seems to work out. So for better or for worse, that's one example of how to run an operation. Yeah, so we get about 1,500 chicks every single week, 52 weeks a year, and slaughter about 1,400 every single week, every of the year. We have 6 farmers markets in the Bay Area, and then we have 2 delivery routes, which we do ourselves down to Monterey, Carmel, Big Sur, and then 1 up into Oakland, Berkeley, San Francisco, and the Peninsula. And then we work with a couple of distributors that send our stuff down to LA and Phoenix. That's through Cream Co. And then another smaller distributor that sends some of our stuff to the North Bay. And yeah, so we have the farm up the coast. We have a warehouse in Santa Cruz where we store all of our farmers market materials and vehicles. A huge walk-in cooler for where we distribute all of our wholesale and store our market retail cuts. And then we have a commercial kitchen in downtown Santa Cruz where we do all of our own butchery, which we've done from the very beginning. One thing that I guess makes us a little unique is we've valued fresh chicken cut only by ourselves since the very beginning. And we used to slaughter on farm, but we quickly outgrew that and had to go to a USDA slaughterhouse in Modesto called Squab Producers. So we get the whole birds back, those and cut and wrap 300 to 400 a week for our farmers markets, and then the other 800 to 900 go to wholesale distribution. That's a quick overview of the operation. We can move on to brooder management real quick. So we use a shipping container for our brooders. We used to, brood in greenhouses, which was, cheap and easy and already there for veggies and such, veggie starts. And that just bred so much bacteria and viruses in the soil. Rats could get in and out easily. And draft, it was really hard to keep draft out with all the roll-up sides and the crappy sliding doors on those greenhouses. So I discovered shipping container brooders on YouTube from Jordan Green out at J&L Green Farm in Virginia. And I built 3 right away, and it kind of changed the game. Rat-proof, draft-free, climate-controlled. And we have 9 now that we use. So we have on a fan on a percentage timer, so it goes off every 5 minutes for 10 to 40 seconds, depending on their size. We have negative pressure vents that open when the fan comes on, so we can circulate that air. We got nipple lines for automatic pressurized water. We have turbo grow feeders for feed, and then we use propane heat, which in my opinion is way better than electric heat. It creates a better ambient temperature and is just more cost effective and easier to use. I've never had fire issues or dangerous issues with those. And we now, for the past 8 years, use peat moss instead of pine shavings. Pine shavings were just too smelly, took hours to clean out because you had to add every day. And with peat moss, they basically neutralize the smell and absorb their poo immediately. And I use a fifth less even though it's about 3 times more expensive, we use about a fifth less, and it's been a really game changer. So the shipping container brooders and the peat moss were the two main things that increased our mortality rate or decreased our mortality rate and made everything better. And you can also use these in layer operations for their first few weeks in the brooder. It translates great. Yep, so there's the inside. We eventually spray foam them, which was also a huge game changer for propane savings and the health, no cold spots. The first 72 hours, we put paper down, just like the large commercial farms. And the chicks are able to find feed immediately, fill their crop, and the sound of their feet on the paper excites them and gets them to eat more. And then we roll it up, and then they're on the peat moss. And you can see the nipple lines are on a crank, so we can raise them as they get older. The turbo grows. We put blocks down as that you can kind of see as they get older to raise the lip a little bit. Next one, you can see the heater in there. We upgraded to non-working refrigerated containers for the last 3 I've built, so we didn't have to spray foam, easier to clean. I just really love them. They're more expensive, but I think worth it. So yeah, you can see them all there. There's the vents and the timer. Our little whiteboard. That's about the extent of my record keeping right there. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just see a couple questions come through, but the peat moss benefits, yeah, 100% balance out the higher costs. Like 2000% times more, in my opinion. Unfortunately, it's a little, not necessarily a renewable resource. It is, but it's really slow and damaging to the tundra. But sometimes you have to make compromises, and that's another day, another discussion, another day. Pasture management. So yeah, we do daily moves, weather permitting. So versus day range, which Tyler can talk about a little bit, 2 methods of pasture raised. The most important part there is that there's, rooted vegetation for these chickens. And so we move them daily with our skid steer. Right now in the winter, so like December, not much rain, we still move them every day. Then the storms came over Christmas, and we had to keep them in one spot for pretty much their whole 4 weeks on pasture. And we just put fresh straw down every day, kept them warm and happy. And the straw composts itself and actually, creates a heated floor. And the chickens are really happy in that. And then once the sun comes out and dries up for a bit, we'll move them to the next area. We have 40 acres. I believe my max is about 1,800 chickens, 1,800 a week on 40 acres. So we're about 1,500. So I feel like I could increase a little bit and not overuse my ground. Let's see. Stocking density, we're at about 600 to 700 per 20 by 40 coop. It gets tight, but we still have great results, and I'm excited to build some more coops and keep growing. Green and brown grass in California, we don't irrigate, but as some of you may know, so I raise a Cornish cross, 2 weeks in the brooder, 4 weeks on pasture, slaughter at 6 weeks or 42 days. Cornish cross are obviously never grow that old, never get that smart, and never really learn to forage very well. So we believe in this system for the fresh air, the sun, and them not sleeping in their poo. But they don't necessarily eat that much grass. They do look around for bugs and seeds, and when there's flowers in the field, they'll eat those. But in the summer when it's brown, we're just happy that the chickens are on fresh ground and get that sunlight and fresh air and wind. So that's kind of our feeling on that. We use LGDs for livestock guardian dogs for protection. And yeah, we can see what else the next picture is. So yeah, there's a little bit of what the ground looks like after they go. And you can see the grass rebounding in the spring. with the brown lines. That's the edges of the coops. Next slide. So there's one of our older coops, which is falling apart, but that's how we feed. We get a Jackie bin and our skid steer out there, and still filling with buckets, but like we just fill 2 buckets at a time, bring them in, fill 2 more, as opposed to back in the day, we'd fill a pickup truck with 30 buckets, bring it out there. This is way more efficient and easier on my employees. There, unfortunately, I leased the land, so I'm not about to install silos, so we still get super sacks from Modesto. That's just a little illustration of, we get a truckload at a time every 3 weeks, so we spend about $18,000 every 3 weeks on feed, because we highly believe in certified organic feed from Modesto. It's some of the best out there. We are not certified organic, though. I was an inspector, and we have so much transparency and real good relationships with our customers that I haven't gone the extra length to certify, but Tyler has, so he can talk about that a little bit.
And Caleb maybe mentioned you were previously certified, but why is it that you decided that it's not?
Well, we were inspected when we were doing veggies, and I guess the broilers were inspected for maybe a year or 2 in the very beginning. But yeah, I mean, it's really just the transparency, and I mean, there's not a lot of competition in the Bay Area, fortunately. So I haven't felt like I needed to in order to gain more customers.
And the processing is not organic, so.
Well, the slaughterhouse that we use now does organic certification, but it's more expensive per bird, and I'm already one of the highest price points in the Bay, and I don't feel like I need to increase my prices even more just to say I'm organic. I don't know if I could increase my prices much more. So
Right.
I haven't. How many pounds of feed per week? Well, we basically use 2,001 super sack a day. So 7,000 pounds a week. Basically 21 tons every 3 weeks is how much feed we go through. Tyler will talk a little bit about feed conversion ratio, but we're probably at around 4 to 1. So for every pound of chicken, they eat 4 pounds of feed. 3 to 1 is amazing. 5 to 1 means you have a lot to learn. And maybe we're more like 3.5. Like I said, I don't really keep records. Tyler has a really good handle on his FCR, and I don't, but we're profitable, making payroll, and things are going smooth. Maybe someday I'll have to do a better job of that. There's our houses out there. Next slide. Yeah, so slaughter and processing. We raise a Cornish cross because I've done both Freedom Rangers and Cornish cross, and just the amount of space we had, the amount of money we had in the beginning, we decided to do Cornish cross because less infrastructure and you need less land because they grow so much faster. With a Freedom Ranger at 9 weeks, say you need 3 more coops and another acre or 2 because you're still moving them every day. And we quickly chose to stick with the Cornish cross and, give them the best life possible and show the large factory farms that you can let these guys outside and they can act like a chicken and still be delicious and sustainable, and good for you. We began you could go, there's us slaughtering on farm under the exemption when we were smaller. But yeah, in the last slide, we started out with the yellow crates that everyone uses and back-breaking stuff. And I was really excited to scale up to a bright coop and have the equipment to have a forklift in the field and pick up the birds. That you can go next slide. Next slide. There's us in the beginning doing just 5 to 600 Cornish cross. And then I'd sleep in the van. 4 hours later, I'd be able to bring the carcasses back in a 1 round. From us, Squab producers is like 2.5 hours away. It's a good full day. Next slide. Then we upgraded a little bit, and and we upgraded a little bit more. And this is where we currently are with, I bought a semi truck. We're doing 1,500 birds ourselves, and then we're also hauling for a neighbor root down farm who has 600. So we're doing 8 to 10 modules with about 2,000, 2,200 birds on it. And then I actually last week just bought not this one, but a refrigerated box truck, 22 feet, and we can pick up, 8 to 10 pallets of our processed chicken. And so that's where we're at now. What's next? Yeah, the slaughterhouse we use could cut and wrap for us, but it's not a pretty job. So we've always wanted to do it ourselves. But it's great to create jobs and have our hands on it, but the overhead is much higher, have more employees to deal with, more leases, workers' comp, just all that kind of stuff. It's a full-time job. I mean, I basically manage right now. I go from kitchen to farm to warehouse, managing all that stuff, which I love. It's a lot of problem solving, but I'm not farming much anymore. Yeah, we could keep going. There's just a little view of our setup. We also grind. And there's our vacuum sealer. We have a HACCP with the state in order to reduce oxygen packing legally. Next, so there's us. We used to raise pigs, and now we buy in pigs from PT Ranch. Not necessarily an exclusive relationship, but we buy most of our hogs and butcher and sell to our customers because there's not many other choices for fresh pasture-raised pork anywhere, but especially in the Bay Area. There's our packs of retail cuts for farmers markets. One reason we stopped doing eggs, well, we basically were doing eggs for our CSA and as a loss leader at farmers markets. And even as a loss leader, the work wasn't, we weren't ready to scale it up. And the work for raising layers was not worth bringing in the customers for eggs to buy other stuff. So one reason we decided to stop doing eggs and veggies too. In order to really be profitable in those, we really had to start scaling those two operations and just wasn't ready for that. And it seemed like it was easier to scale broilers and run with that. So that's the direction we went. There's some pork, there's some our marinated cuts. So anything that doesn't sell after the Sunday market, we grind or brine in order to add an extra week of life to it because of the salt. Adds an extra week of life to the fresh. And we usually sell out of our sausage and marinades that next week. And we're just constantly rolling through it. And another reason it's nice to do it yourself is because you can do that. Most slaughterhouses cut and wrap don't marinate, they'll grind. But yeah, we can come up with our own flavors, seasonal flavors, all that stuff. Yeah, record keeping, not much, but we use QuickBooks Online. We use Square for all of our POS, ASAP invoices for our invoices, getting better at spreadsheets to kind of keep track of some stuff. Yeah. It is with a single enterprise. I've had a lot more time from my boy and my family, and I'm the flexible parent now, which is crazy because when I was doing everything, it was basically 7 to 7, sun up to sundown, and things are going really well. But I started in 2008 basically, and my son was born in 2018, so it's about 10 years to really. But I wasn't making much then, and now at 2025, I'm paying myself $75,000, which isn't enough for Santa Cruz, but my wife has benefits, and we're doing okay. But I'd like to keep growing and making more. And yeah, there's some resources real quick. I'm also, you don't have to copy all that down, but I'm always open to answer emails and texts and I'm open source. So I have lists of all the stuff I use, equipment, contacts in the industries, and happy to help with anything.
Thank you, Caleb. That's awesome.
You're welcome.
So I'll stop sharing and we'll see if any questions or just move on with Tyler. So 2 questions I see are, what's your price point and how many employees do you have?
Well, do you want to answer that, Caleb, or?
Oh, sorry. Was
Yeah.
that what the question of employees? I have a father and son duo that do all the field work. So they basically are responsible for 8 20 by 40 mobile coops, all the feeding, moving, loading for slaughter. And then me and another part-timer do all the brooders, all the baby chick stuff. And then I have 3 delivery drivers, 3 farmers marketeers, 3 full-time butchers, and 1 part-time butcher. So the drivers and farmers marketeers are part-timers. So like 5 full-timers and 4 part-timers or something like that.
Great. And this could be a question for, I think, either Tyler or Caleb, is transporting the chickens. Do they get stressed?
I mean, that's one of the compromises you have to make as a farmer when you outgrow slaughtering on farm is, I mean, there's no perfect system. Yes, the chickens are going to be stressed in the collecting and the loading, but it's kind of like, what Temple Grandin talks, the squeeze chute and everything. So if you put enough chickens, depending on the temperature outside, in one of those modules, they're nice and tight in there and they can't move around and they feel secure. And you transport them at night when it's dark, and they're usually slaughtered by sunup. So that helps a lot. But yeah, it's gonna stress them out. Fortunately, all the customers we've worked with, I mean, we're still, people can't say enough good things about the quality. So I know that, what we're doing is pretty close to as sustainably and ethically as we can do.
Right. So you can kind of track the transportation stress both qualitatively and quantitatively. So qualitatively, it's pretty clear that our chicken is better than anything else you've ever had. And then quantitatively, if you want to throw numbers at it, you can track your DOAs, you can track your condemns, and this
What
is
does DOA stand for?
dead on arrival.
Uh-huh.
So if they're really stressed, they're going to die. Where I'm sure Kayla and I have both had stories where trucks got delayed and things happen, and there's obvious when DOAs happen, but normally, so we send down loads of 3,000 birds and we'll have 2 to 3 DOAs. I mean, it's something to be concerned about, but it's the overall, as Caleb was saying, in the overall life of the bird, that transportation stress is pretty minimal and we minimize it the best we can. So something to pay attention to, but it's not a huge concern.
Great. There's a few more questions, but why don't we go ahead, Tyler, with your presentation, then we'll get to some more questions. There will be time.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, I raise our chickens. You guys do see my little screen, my little picture, right? Yep. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go through this pretty quick because 80% of what Caleb and I do overlap. And so you don't need to hear me say the same thing again. We are different in that we do day range instead of daily moves. So kind of a very fundamental difference is that means we move the poop away from the chickens and Caleb moves the chickens away from the poop. And the reason we chose this method is that it fits our landscape, our context. We don't have kind of nice, easy fields where we can just move hoops over hundreds of acres. We have like 5 acres here and 10 acres there and big creeks in between. So we couldn't do daily moves. It just didn't work. But everything else we do is pretty much the same. So We brood. This is what our brooder looks like. We have the propane heaters. These birds are brooded on pasture. You can just barely see the outside there. When they get bigger, we just let them out onto pasture from where we brooded them. And then this is how we handle taking the poop away from the birds, is that we add bedding. We're going to compost all of this and spread it on the rangeland for our rangeland health. Our ranch is about 4,000 acres. We run about 40-ish acres for the chickens. And so the chickens are on our property. Well, they make money, but mostly they're on the property to create fertility. And that fertility doesn't need to live in the bottomland. It needs to live up in the upland. And so this is how we take chicken fertility and move it to the upland. So these hoops stay in. I'm ripping through this, guys. I know I'm talking fast. So we have these hoops. We build them on the ranch here, and then we set them in place for the life of the birds. The birds are harvested. We pick up all of this infrastructure and we move it to a new location. We got this super cool windrow machine. So this is actually my dad going over one of these poultry cakes, litter cakes, and you can see it churning up. Do I have a picture? I don't have a picture, but this makes a really nice little windrow. It's fun. So here's the bird's eye. You can see we've got some birds down here where we're growing them out. You can see the compost pile over here where we're composting where the birds were. You can see we've got some hoops stashed for the next spots. So you can kind of get a sense of how we're moving this infrastructure through the fields. And then eventually we have probably 2 times this much acreage that will move through for the summer. So down on ground level, this is what our chickens experience. It's not so bad. So they can go in here, they get to choose all their density. This is one of the benefits to day range. So the daily moves, they are locked into their density. They can't ever escape. If one bird wants more room, it can't. It runs into a wall. Our birds, boom, no walls. They can be as tight as they want. They can be as loose as they want. They can be inside. They can be outside. It's 100% up to them. And this is what our birds look like at the end. We don't do any processing ourselves. All of that's handled at the processor. We outsource a lot of things. So Caleb had those 9 employees, like, holy crap, I can barely control myself. So, but we outsource all of that. So processing is outsourced, distribution is outsourced. We do direct to consumer shipping, that's outsourced. Yeah, we basically raise birds here. That's all we do. So let me get out of this. So that's how we raise the birds. That's super quick. I would be more than happy to talk more about it later, but I only have so much time. What I want to cover is, as I'm switching screens here. Okay. Yeah, you guys are seeing a little spreadsheet, right? So our feed, that's just regular irrigated pasture. The grass doesn't really matter. I mean, you can definitely get into it and geek out on what sort of grass you should have, but any grass is good. Because as Caleb said, they get most of their feed from the supplement. So we give them, that's just the way it works. So Caleb and I have been around long enough, both of us well over 10 years, pushing 15. So we somehow have managed to survive, and many people have got into chickens, and then within about 2 to 3, 4 years, they fade away. And Caleb and I can kind of just look at the outside and see what their asking price is. And we have enough insight as to kind of general industry costs here in California. And we can tell that they're going to go out of business. They're not paying attention to their numbers. They're selling things too cheap. And so what I want to show here is a pretty simplistic spreadsheet, but that has all of the numbers that you need to kind of play with to understand what your broiler production system would be. This could be adapted for anything. This could be adapted for layers or for beef or for whatever. You tweak a little of these production numbers, but this is aimed at broiler production. So very likely if you're watching this at a farm conference, because we're at a farm conference, you are coming here to talk to us about these kind of couple of columns. And this is the fun stuff. This is production. This is what producers want to do. We want to grow animals. We want to raise beef. We want to take care of the land. That's our passion. We didn't get into this because we wanted to be office flunkies staring at spreadsheets all the time. But I'm telling you that when you get, this is the number that you care about. This is the number that's going to keep you in business. This is the number that's going to pay for your kids' college education. This is the number that's going to pay for vacations, retirement, for transitioning to the next generation. This number is the one that matters. And it is somewhat one step removed from what you normally think about. And it's going to be really easy not to do all of this. So if you kind of think of this as a flow, the way I have it set up now is you start on the left and you move to the right. It's actually really opposite. You should start way over here. You should say, hey, where does poultry fit into my goals, my enterprise? What am I trying to do with it? Why am I doing all of this work for, for why? Chickens, Caleb kind of glossed over it. He didn't, I heard it. Chickens are a lot of work. You're going to see them once a day, twice a day. He's got 2 full-time guys out in the field, so that's 80 hours a week. We have 2 full-time guys out in the field. We have 80 hours a week, plus what I do on the weekend. So we're probably pushing 90 hours a week. So we're going to do about 40,000 birds this year. Caleb's a little bit more. And it just takes a lot of work. And the problem is it doesn't kind of scale the same way that if you just do 1,000 birds, you're still going to have almost the same amount of work. Not really, but you have animals on the ground. You're going to be taking care of them multiple times a day. You can't just ignore them. And if you're going to be doing a whole bunch of work, you might as well make some money while you're doing it. So what I'm going to do here, if this makes sense so far, is I'm going to kind of throw some numbers at you and kind of play with my little COGS calculator here and kind of give you a sense of the scale you're probably going to need to be at to make this worthwhile, what sort of production skills you're going to have to attain to make this work. And you're going to be shocked by how many birds that's going to turn out to be. So yeah, let's have some fun. Let's play with some numbers. So I actually do like spreadsheets. My true joy is being out there in the field, like out here. I can't point at it. I'd rather be out there right now playing with the chickens, but if I can't be out there playing with the spreadsheets, probably the next best thing. So does this all make sense so far? Can you guys give me a thumbs up if I'm rattling on about things that make sense? Whatever. I'll keep going. So the first number that you really want to look at is your gross margin. This is kind of and if you need, thumbs up. Yay. Thanks, guys. I feel so loved. It's different when you're presenting. I've never done it here. That's the number that really matters. And as long as there's no CPAs or bookkeepers or CFOs in the group, I'm going to throw out some blanket statements that will make a CFO cringe or a CPA cringe, but we're farmers, it's fine. This number works. Number one, this number should be 50% at a minimum, 50% margin. Through all sorts of trickiness that smart people have told me, if you're at a 50% gross margin, that means you actually make enough money per unit. So that's number one. Number two, you might have noticed it over here on my inputs. I don't have any labor. I don't have any land. That is because this calculator is based on something called enterprise accounting, which basically looks at each enterprise on its own. And because enterprises often share labor, it is incredibly tedious and usually wrong to try and divvy out. I spent 2 hours on this enterprise and 3 hours on that enterprise. All that ends up in overhead. You deal with that later. That's why you care about your gross profit and your gross margin. This could also be your contribution margin. If that makes me sound like I know what I'm talking about, I'm only about a half a step ahead of you. So yeah, let's do it. Okay. Well, I guess let me review these real quick. So these in green are your production metrics that you should be paying attention to: your death loss, your average carcass weight, and your feed conversion ratio. So the feed conversion ratio is actually probably the number one production metric you need to know. That's how many pounds of feed to how many pounds of chicken. Some people track it to live weight. Some people track it to carcass weight. But whatever it is, pick a method and be consistent. But that encapsulates all of your stuff. That's going to encapsulate your death loss. That's going to encapsulate when they die, your health. Because if they die early, anyways, it's all there. Take my word for it. Your FCR is super important. So basically, it's pretty simple. Log all the feed you give a flock. Figure out how many pounds you either grew live weight or how many pounds you got in a carcass. Carcass is a little better because it captures if you have any sort of DOAs, any condemnations, but it's a little harder to track. You have more spreadsheets. And these things change your bottom line quite a bit. So in this particular scenario, death loss, that's kind of advanced. If you guys are starting, you probably want to figure at least a 20% death loss. Your average carcass weight. So when I say that, that's your whole bird, head and feet off. They would call that a wog in the industry without giblets. You're not going to be very good at it. You're going to grow a small bird, and your feed conversion ratio is probably going to be bad. So like Caleb said, a goal is a middle of the road is 4. You probably want to come down closer to 3, if not under 3. Depends a little bit on if this is to live weight or to carcass weight, but either way, track it. And the lower the number, the better. So look, I wasn't even really messing around, but I think I was messing around, but our gross margin used to be 20%, 28%. And I just changed it back to probably roughly what you're going to do when you're starting out. And we just went from a not great to an abysmal margin. And I haven't even finished this yet. So let's look at these costs. So when you're looking at chicken production, you have some kind of big elephant costs that are just massive in your final cost. And the biggest one is your feed cost per ton. So Caleb and I are both buying organic feed. We know that if you're buying organic feed at 1,500 birds a year, you're probably going to be spending $1,100 a ton. Well, I'll be nice. I'll call it 1,000. Chicks, you're probably going to buy them for about $225. That's probably reasonable. Processing, I actually updated this since our last talk. I realized I did my math wrong. So it's closer to $6 a head on processing. Freight, for me personally, anytime I put something on a truck, it costs $1,000, $1,200. I'm 4 hours away from the same processor as Caleb. Like I said, we outsource just about everything. So it cost me $1,200, more than that, but we'll just say $1,200 to get the animals down there. And then miscellaneous, your bedding, people are asking about, oh, peat moss is so expensive. It probably is, but ultimately it falls down into this miscellaneous category. It is not a needle mover in your overall or your propane cost, all the little et ceteras, your repair and maintenance. Maybe miscellaneous should be higher. Call it 3, whatever. Okay. So I just set this up. This is based on being an organic producer in California within 4 hours of Modesto, and you want to do 1,500 head, and you're going to do it in, let's see what I have. I have it set up in 3 harvests. So you're going to do 3 flocks of 500. Okay, that was your production. That was the fun stuff that we all like to do. And now we're like, oh, great. So we're going to skip this little thing because no one pays attention to this. Hopefully you will after this talk, but I guarantee what you're going to do is, oh, I'm going to produce. You're probably not even going to pay attention to this stuff. You're going to like, look at that. Like, oh, I just spent $1,000 to feed. And they're going to hop over here to your sales. They're going to be like, oh, what is my neighbor going to sell it for? Or even worse, like, oh, what is my neighbor going to pay me for it? And they're like, well, grocery store chicken. I don't actually know what it is. I haven't bought a grocery store chicken in so long. No idea. So let's say grocery store chicken is $3 a pound. And they're going to be like, well, you grew it yourself, so it should be cheaper. I want it for $2 a pound. Or maybe if they're very nice, they'll be like, oh, it's homegrown. It has a little bit of a premium. I'll pay you $1 a pound more. $25 for 6 pounders. So $4 a pound. Something like that. So anyways, and then you're just setting your price randomly. So it just so happens we're going to call it $5 a pound. Say you get a dollar a pound premium over grocery store chicken. Now you're like, cool, look, I just made $26,000 off of 1,500 head. This is awesome. Then you're like, wait a second, I feel really broke. Did I actually make any money? Well, look over here. Well, look what we just discovered. You lost money. Not only did you lose money in an absolute sense, you had a ridiculously terrible gross margin. So now that you're smart, now that you're listening to me and I'm going to keep you in business, let's go back and look what happened to your costs. Your costs are actually $5.49 a pound. Right? I mean, it's right there. So that means that if we want this gross margin to be 50%, 549, 550. So we need to make this like $11 a pound. So there you go. If you, in this particular set of circumstances, oh, is this here? I can make this a little bigger if you guys can't see it. Is that any better? I see Caleb was squinting. I can't see. Caleb, you might need to get glasses.
Maybe.
It's helpful. And it also looks like, Tyler,
Yeah.
If at $1,000 a ton, that's 50 cents a pound. That's a pretty good price for organic feed. I've seen it a lot more expensive than that. So
Oh yeah. I mean,
checks.
Yeah.
Put in real numbers in this calculator, and you'll come up with a much better idea of whether you
right. So what I'm trying to do is just give you a sense that all of us producers want to live here. How many can I grow? What's it going to cost me? I don't really care about my production. I'm just going to base my sales on what average is out there. I'm not going to actually look at my own numbers. I'm going to let something else external set up my, determine my pricing. And that doesn't work. You will be out of business in a short amount of time. So that's what this is not a perfect example. This is a rough cut, get me in the ballpark, and then go talk to someone a lot smarter and figure out if this is worthwhile. So another way of doing this is because this is, well, how much time do I have? Someone needs to cut me off when I talk too much. Another way of working this is backwards, is to say, hey, 50% margin, great. We've got that dialed in. A lot of you said that this is going to be a supplementary enterprise. It's not going to be your main enterprise. So then you need to set your gross profit goal. Like, how much money should this enterprise contribute to my overall business? And I don't know. Let's pick a number. $28,000. Maybe that's good, but let's change it. Let's say it should be $75,000. I don't actually know what that's going to be. Let's find out. Is that 3,000 birds? Nope. 4,500 birds and 4,000. Close enough. 4,000 birds. Okay. So we just realized that we need a 50% margin. We need to make $75,000 off of this enterprise. We just realized that we have to grow 4,000 birds a year. And that's going to cost us $76,000 of input. We're going to get $77,000 back. We're going to make profit, but do we have $76,000 on hand? Cash flow, there's stuff to consider, but just kind of fundamentally, you're spending a lot of money. Okay, now the other thing we can do here is let's let's play around. Let's say we still need our 50% margin. We want our 75,000 gross profit. Let's say we get better at growing. Let's move it down to 15%. Let's say our carcass, this is a big needle mover, people. The bigger a carcass you can sell, the more money you make. This additional half a pound I'm about to add here really costs you very little to add. If you look at your overhead costs, in general, the more pounds you sell, the more money you make. And it's a lot easier to sell a heavier bird than to sell more birds, if that made any sense. So move this up to 4. I'm trying to sell some chicken to an operation, and they're like, we want a 5.5 pound carcass, which is huge. But the thing is that you can bake in so much overhead costs. There's a reason. Well, sorry, rabbit trail, won't go down there. There's a lot of interesting reasons why bigger is better, heavier is better. Okay, now this is your second biggest lever. Let's move our feed conversion ratio down. Let's say we got better. Let's say we became a 3.75 producer. Okay, now let's say so this $1,000 a ton is kind of based on sacked feed. Let's say we moved up to the tote bags like Caleb, or bulk. For instance, I'm getting bulk organic feed and that's 24 tons at a time. That's a really fun bill when the truck shows up for $800 a ton. Okay, processing is still gonna be about $600. Freight, it's not super. Well, let's just change this down just to make it a little bit easier. We got a little bit bigger. We made MIFE a little easier. Boom. Look, we just went to a 60% margin, which is pretty damn good. I mean, when I talk to smart people, which I am not, if they saw a 60% gross margin, they're like, fireworks are going off. Like it's a big deal. And so you're making $100,000, but you're trying to sell 4,000 birds at $11 a pound. That ain't easy. So now that we've gotten better, we can move this down a little bit to 8. Oops, no, 725 won't work. 825. Nope. Going to move it up to 9. So we can go down to $9 a pound, right? So what happened is we got better at producing, and now we can raise our price, still meet our margin, and still meet our gross profit. So this whole thing it's super important. And here, this number, this $9 a pound, this is, I mean, I've kind of just been flipping it around back and forth, but this is not just your asking price. This is how you establish, this is the value that you create. This is not just, here's a chicken for $9 a pound. This is the story of raising chickens where they get a better ocean view than I do. This is your story about, the fires and moving and keeping this business alive. This is the story about how I'm telling Caleb's story, by the way. This is the story about how we don't like the big processor. They're good, but we want to hand touch every piece of meat and make sure you get the absolute best chunk of chicken ever. This is your story, and this is the whole value that you create, and it gets distilled down into this $9 a pound number or $11 a pound number. And that really ultimately, I might even have to have it backwards. This sales number might even have to come after analysis, that you really need to start off figuring out who your customer is and how much they're going to pay for it. And then once you know that, then you have to figure out your gross profit and your gross margin. And then you have to figure out your production costs. And then you figure out how many birds per year you grow. I don't know if that made any sense. I should have set this spreadsheet up backwards where I could start it right to left instead of left to right. But this is just giving you a sense of things. Now, 4,000 birds a year, I mean, $76,000 sounds like a lot of money, but you're going to have rent to pay out of that profit. You're going to have employees to pay out of there. You're going to have yourself to pay out of there. I mean, that's not really enough. That's not enough. So let's play around with the scenario. 15 minutes left. Thank you.
It's a
I'm
little
gonna
less
just
than
jump
that
this up to commercial. I'm gonna do it real quick. It'll go quick. Caleb and I kind of bullshitted about this, and we agree that probably if you're just doing chickens alone, you're probably going to be about 40,000 birds a year. Your chicks will be down a little bit. Your shipping will be about the same. Your wholesale can come down to 8. Your wholesale can come down to 825. The average carcass, yeah. So there you go. So just to give you context, that this is kind of sort of sort of in a very whole bunch of employees, weird scenarios where if you want to do chickens, broiler chickens full time, you're looking at tens of thousands of birds a year, probably in the neighborhood of 40. So, and this is for certified organic in California, plus or minus 2 to 4 hours away from your processor. And there's only 2 in California. One's in Stockton, one's in Modesto. Take your pick. You still need to be within 4 to 5 hours of there.
So those are Schwab and what is the other one?
Grimaud Farms. Okay. I saw that someone was giving me the high sign, so I will stop talking. We can switch over to questions. I'm ready for questions. I'll leave this up. If anyone, actually, let's do it this way. If anyone has questions about the spreadsheet, let's knock those out. And then once those are done, I'll close this and we can go back and answer any sort of other questions.
One person asked Tyler whether you could share the spreadsheet.
Sure. Let's see. Copy link.
And with the Poultry Entrepreneurs Toolbox, I hope to include a whole lot of different budgeting tools, and as well as production information.
Right. So if for the pasture egg layers, you would change your carcass and your feed conversion ratio. So you would have, it would basically be lay rate and pounds of feed to egg. So lay rate, well, it's not going to work, but you change this to like, you'd probably want a 90% lay rate. And then I have no idea what your feed conversion ratio is. Probably, I think it's like a 1/4 pound of feed per egg, something like that. Anyways, the formulas would have to change a little bit, but that's how you would turn this into a pasture egg sheet. And death loss would go down. It would still be there. But that's how you could do it. And then anyways, it could be done. It's not very tricky.
Yeah. And as Ann mentioned, APPA, APPPA, American Pasture Poultry Association, has bunch of spreadsheet calculators on their website. If you're a member, only $60 a year or something like that. And the forum, the Facebook group, and their archives of spreadsheets and articles is quite amazing. So definitely check that out.
Yeah, APPA will answer any question. It is, if you are doing chickens, you should be on APPA. Even if you're not doing chickens, they're still just such a great group of people. It is the one email that I read for sure anytime it shows up.
And they do have a monthly call that you can get on for free if you want to just hear, like, what is it that people are talking about? What questions do people have? And they ask and answer each other's questions. And it's really quite impressive. So anything poultry, birds, APPA. And MPAN is also very interesting. People are very active there in terms of any kind of processing question. And FACT also has a number of different recorded and live webinars and lots of different tools like that.
Right. So I would just also, just as you're talking about processing, this spreadsheet I just showed was just production based, birds from chick to harvest. And if you wanted to analyze a simple spreadsheet like this, you wouldn't put processing in here. Processing is its own beast. Caleb knows this more intimately than I do, but I mean, there's a ton of overhead. There's a ton of experience. The rabbit trail I didn't necessarily go down was that when you move into processing, pounds of product processed per hour becomes your metric. And so there is a big movement to have small scale processors be encouraged to come back into existence, which is an absolute great thing. 100% agree with it. However, it doesn't account for the reality that processing is it's a numbers game, it's a volume game. That there's a reason why there are some custom beef processors, because one beef holds about the same processing rail space as like 5 chickens, 10 chickens. So 10 chickens, let's be really generous, call it at 100 pounds. It's not, but let's be generous. One beef is going to be 500 pounds, right? And that's the same amount of space kind of on a rail if you imagine a processing plant. And so that is why we are actually lucky in California to have 2 custom processors. There are many states that have 0. So it's yeah, I don't know. That was a rabbit trail. I was stalling until I got some good questions, or more questions, not good.
There was one about whether you breed your chickens earlier, and I said that we have a webinar at NCAT about breeding, and I'm guessing that both you guys just buy your chicks.
Right. Hatchery, again, is an entirely different enterprise. It's doable. There are hatcheries that make money. There are breeders who make money, but that you're going to be a very rare person who can be the breeding of the birds, the hatching of the eggs, the rearing of the broilers, and the selling of the meat. Those are some massively complicated enterprises, and I don't know if you can put them. I'm sure you could, given enough time and money, you could link those all together. But realistically, the most you would possibly do, I've ever seen done commercially, is growing them and processing them. No one does the hatchery, and even less do the breeding. It's a different mind. One brain can't handle all of that.
And it looks like we're right up on time. And Evan, you probably need another little moment to close us. I'm going to say, I put my email is annb@ncat.org. And please feel free to email me with additional questions. I'll try to connect you with what I can.
I dropped the link to that spreadsheet in the chat. And if you want it, email. If you can't find it there, email me, Tyler@bigbluffranch.com. It's basically my little name right there.
Thank you so much, Caleb and Tyler. We really appreciate your experience and wisdom.
Yeah, thank you all so much for joining us here at the conference. And we hope to be in touch soon. And to all our attendees, we hope to see you at the next workshop. Enjoy the rest of the conference.